Welcome to the second bi-quarterly threat management community office hours. We're here to help any community contributors who are interested in looking at the threat management portions of the GitLab product. So that would be the threat insights group around the security dashboards, the MR pipeline widget, so the security information displayed to customers in the MR view. And ideally, we will eventually be talking about container security and aspects of developing with container security, but unfortunately, we don't have any developers on the call today with a lot of experience in that area. So in future community contributor office hours, we'll focus more on that area. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let's introduce who's on the call today. You wanna go ahead and introduce yourself, gentlemen?
Sure. Hello, my name is Alexander Trinsky. I'm a front-end engineer here on the threat management team. Sam, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, and I'm Sam White. I'm a senior product manager in our container security group.
Thanks for joining us today. Unfortunately, we don't have any community contributors on the call to ask us live questions, but we did receive some questions in advance from one of the contributors who we've been working with over the last couple of months. So like I said, we will be scheduling more of these in the future, and we'll try and find a way to get other members of the community to come and have more of an interactive discussion. So this is the second of these community office hours, and I don't know if we need to recap a lot of what Tiago and Alan talked about a month ago. So I did share the recording of the previous office hours. I encourage anyone who's watching this to take a look at that. But I will recap some of the items that they discussed there. I'm not going to get into detail about setting up your GDK or GitLab runner, but there are some basic things that you need to have running on your computer to be able to develop against GitLab. The main things being your GDK, your GitLab development kit. That's just your general development environment, all of the dependencies, all of the libraries that you need. And then on top of that, GitLab runner allows you to run the CI/CD jobs within GitLab. So I know this has changed recently, and I didn't update this ticket to reflect it. Alexander, we had an issue in the last milestone around seeding projects, so that you don't necessarily need to have the runner running in order to see all of the security dashboards. Have you used that yet?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I do not remember the progress that's been made with that.
I bet I can find it right here. And I will update this issue with the outcome of that. So this has been closed, and this should make it easier for community contributors or other people like maybe our UX designer or our technical writers to be able to run GitLab locally and see the security dashboards without having GitLab runner, without needing it to be healthy and running alongside the GDK. I don't believe this solves that problem for the MR widget. I believe you'll still need runner active for the MR widget, but this would allow you to see the security dashboards in a much lower effort way. There was a great blog that was shared recently that I think any community contributor who is just getting started would benefit from greatly to read. So I've linked that here. It was written by one of our developers here at GitLab, and it really takes you through, some of the links that I was just sharing with you around getting your environment set up, as well as, some of the processes that we have around our product development workflow. And then finally, we have a Slack channel for community contributors. Unfortunately, Ray Pyack's last day was last week, so one of our main contacts for our community contributors is no longer with the company. That'll make it a little bit more challenging, but I'm confident that there'll be other GitLab team members there ready to help you if you have questions. Okay, I'm talking a lot. Alexander,
and you're doing a great job.
Alexander, do you have anything that you want to add to sort of the getting started tips and steps?
One thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that the GDK and the runners can be finicky, and it can be difficult for even us here who work on it every day for many hours a day. And so if you run into problems, just know you're not alone. We are probably running into problems as well, and definitely feel free to reach out if you know you've tried everything you know how to try, and you just need some extra assistance. We're certainly here to help you.
I second that. And not everyone has a resource like Alexander, who's the first person I go to ask about GDK problems. So be sure to go to the Gitter Slack channel. I think that's a great place to go. Additionally, though, just Googling GitLab troubleshooting GDK. There's a wealth of information out there for you. Just given how transparent GitLab is, you'll find a lot of discussions, issues, blog posts, documentation. Yeah. So I'm going to actually skip really quickly to number 4, because I think that's a good segue into some of the documentation that we've created to try and assist some of our community contributors to answer questions asynchronously. So we can add to this, and I'd like to continue to do that over time. My screen is probably very small. I'm going to zoom in.
No,
is it good?
Oh,
okay, good.
No, actually, never mind. Zoom in. Yeah, you're
okay.
Right.
So I've created this snippet, and you know, like I said, I think there's a lot of additional information that can be added to this, but it answers some basic questions around contributing to threat management, specifically to get to threat management, not more high level around keeping the GDK healthy. One of the big challenges that we just discussed was making sure that you have projects that have vulnerabilities that allow you to see the data on our dashboards. So in order to do that, you need to have both the right license associated with your user, and we can help you with that. There's some instructions on the community contributor how-to pages for how to handle the license. Ray used to be a good contact for that, so please post in the Gitter Slack channel if you run into any problems with your license. You basically, I think, Alexander, you helped one of our contributors with this previously. Was it a 30-day free trial that gets extended?
Yes, correct. So you start off with a 30-day free trial, and then as you continue to contribute to GitLab, then we'll extend that as needed.
Okay, so I'm not going to read all of these questions, so I just wanted to point this out as a resource for everybody. And I think I will add the 3 questions that we have in the agenda from our meeting today, the recap of the discussion here to this as well. And I believe there's one more snippet. You and I talked about this last week, Alexander, that I'd meant to link to this, that either you or Daniel created, that had some more steps for, it was the dismissing a vulnerability with an MR, right? The auto remediation steps. So we've got some use cases of data that's fairly specific to certain vulnerability types that allows you to expose some different features in our UI. The ability to create an MR directly from a vulnerability is what I'm talking about specifically, which requires some more complex instructions. So we will link that here as well, to help in any cases that someone picks up issues around that area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, so the final thing that I wanted to do before I hand it over to Alexander to address some of the questions that Justin has pre-submitted for us was take a quick look at our workflow board. So this board is filtered to the Threat Insights group. And I've actually also added the filter for good for new contributors. So this label is added to issues as we identify them being something that somebody who's pretty new to contributing to GitLab could pick up. So for a community contributor who's been contributing for longer, they could remove this and start to look at issues that don't have that label. But this is a good place to get started. So one thing that I wanted to highlight on this board is our workflow. So you can see the columns here. These represent our workflow steps. All of the workflow steps prior to refinement are typically handled by our product managers and our engineering managers and our UX designers. So that's why I had these collapsed to begin with. I think that any community contributor who comes in to look at this board could ignore those items and really start to look at the items that are in refinement or ready for development. Refinement is something that could be very helpful in that the engineers look at the issues in advance and give an implementation plan and additional information to help whoever picks up that issue. But if something is a fairly small issue, you can still take a look at it. I would say that I would encourage you to ask questions in the issue if it's something that you're interested in working on and it's in the refinement state. That way the engineer who's refining it can let you know if they think it's ready to be picked up, answer some of your questions, or tell you that you should wait for a little while until they've got all of the details ironed out in that issue. But once something's in ready for development, that's up for grabs. And you can see here, this is not filtered on any milestone. So these are all of the issues for Threat Insights that are good for new contributors and any of our upcoming milestones. A lot of these are front-end issues. I don't see a lot of back-end issues, but I do want to highlight that we have labels that let you filter between front-end and back-end. So if you were coming in as a front-end developer, you could add this front-end label and then restrict the issues that you see in the list just to those issues that you might be more interested in. Right now, we do have a number of issues around our GraphQL migration of our vulnerability details page. That would be great for anyone who has a bit of GraphQL experience to pick up or would like to gain some of that experience. So these are all fairly small issues. Sometimes you'll also see follow-ups. So these are both follow-ups from previous MRs that other engineers have worked to merge, and there was feedback from a reviewer or a maintainer that didn't need to be handled right at that moment. So we create follow-up issues. So these are also great issues for community contributors to pick up because they're not new feature development that one of our product managers might be waiting for. They're usually a bit more straightforward and have a good amount of context about where in the code you're going to go to make that change. Anything else to add here? I don't think so. Alexander, anything that you can think of?
No, you've done a great job of explaining our workflow.
One thing to call out that was news to me when we started working with the great community contributors that we have worked with in threat management is that community contributors can't assign issues to themselves. You can't do anything except comment on an issue. So when you do find an issue that's interesting, put a comment in, say you're interested in it, and someone like myself or Alexander or Tiago or someone else on the threat management team will help you. So we will see that comment, we will assign it to you. We often assign a buddy. So if you're a very first time contributor, we'd ask one of the engineers on the team to be your go-to person to ask questions to. If you've done this a few times, you might not want a buddy at that point. You might want to just do it on your own, and we're okay with that too. Okay, so we have a few questions from Justin. Justin contributed to one of our first backend community contribution MRs over the last month. And I'm gonna stop talking and let Alexander respond to Justin's 3 questions that he's posed for us.
Thank you, Lindsay. I want to preface this sort of walkthrough with, again, that I work primarily on the front end here on the threat management team. And so the workflows that I will be demonstrating are very front end focused. I will dive a little bit into the back end as I've learned it since starting here. But Justin, I apologize if you wanted a more back-end focused walkthrough here. So I will share my screen now.
Probably wants me to stop sharing first.
It definitely does.
Hold on just a second. There you go.
Cool. So let me make sure I get the right desktop here. Cool. You can see my VS Code window.
Yes.
Cool. Excellent. Okay. So as it was mentioned, the parts of the app that our team, our threat management deals with is when you go into a project and you go in this security and compliance sidebar and the security dashboard. That is what we own. This portion we own clicking on a vulnerability and seeing all the details about it. We see, we're also responsible for the group and instance level dashboards or security centers, as well as if you go into a pipeline, you view the security tab. Here's another list of vulnerabilities. If you click on, select one of these, a modal pops up. This is all of our domain. And then if you go into a merge request, there will be a security section. And that also lists out the vulnerabilities. This is another thing we own. So those are sort of the 4 main sections. And I'm going to show you where all that code lives here in VS Code. So the first one I mentioned was the security dashboard. That is located here in the path EE. You can see the path above here. But basically, a common occurrence is all these security features are for higher level tiers of GitLab, so Gold and Ultimate. And so they will, all of them primarily live in the first in the EE subdomain. The open, more free version components live in app, just app instead of EE. That's right here. But so you always remember, like if you're looking for a path, it should start with EE inside of our code base. So okay, so here I have this component for first class group security dashboard. That's going to be in at this path, basically EE security dashboard. The next one is the details page that I selected, and that is similarly in EE and then vulnerabilities. And that's where all this repo is where all the detail page for those vulnerabilities live. I should, oh, I have an idea. I'll do a split screen. Okay, so everything for the security dashboards lives in this repo, the security dashboard repo. Everything in the details page here lives at the vulnerabilities repo here. And so you see the footer, the header, footers, everything below the related issues, headers up here, details is in there. And then for the pipeline, that's going to live in the security reports repo here. So vulnerability details is for the modal, but you see some modal components here, and that's in security reports. And then the pipeline or the MR widget lives also in the security reports, but also because the MRs are also a free version or a free feature, some of it also lives in the non-EE section. So you'd find sort of these like report blocks in like app and then reports section repo here. And so what was the question? I feel like I lost the thread here.
No, I think you're definitely answering the question. So the question was around the major areas of code. Can you provide a high-level tour of the part of the code base, which is exactly what you're doing?
Cool. And so that's mainly the front end, and these repos are broken down into components. So that's where you're going to have all your view logic, and then they'll also have a GraphQL directory, which is, as you'd expect, is the GraphQL queries and mutations. The store for if some of our pages still are using Vuex instead of relying solely on GraphQL, that's where you'll find all the Vuex information. And then the utils for miscellaneous functions that we didn't think necessarily lived in the components. So that's the front end. And moving slightly to the back end, we basically, how this works is everything gets served up from our Ruby on Rails side. And so starting from the front, we have our components, and then moving slightly back, we'll have these normally _init files, which don't look like much. They basically create a new Vue application. And you may be wondering, oh, well, where does that get initiated? And so if we do a global search for first class init, inevitably you'll come to a file that's called like index.js, or sometimes there'll be like show, and yeah, like vulnerabilities index or show index. If you know Ruby on Rails, you know that these are sort of common endpoints. And so this is where the first, just by like doing a global search for this class net or this file name, we can see that, oh, this gets imported here, and listens, adds an event listener here. And if you're trying to like copy pieces of code in global search, this is as far as you're going to get, because this doesn't tell you where in the Rails application gets served up. And that's because in our Webpack configuration, we have it set up so that the path here, sort of the end path here, maps to the Ruby on Rails like XAML file that serves it up. And so if I look at here, groups, security, vulnerabilities, index, and I have this up already. So, but if you go to EE app views, and then there's group, security, vulnerabilities, index, you can see that these sort of tail end paths match. And this is what Webpack is doing is it's configured to look at this path and then match up with this corresponding path here. And so this is where in here you see that there's we initiate the init method with some element on the page, JS group vulnerabilities, and then sure enough, here in the XAML file, JS group vulnerabilities, this is the element that is being found, and we're passing data in here, which then gets picked up in the EL data set here in the first class init. And then
that detail around the Webpack seems like something that would be a little hard for someone who's first picking up this code as far as discoverability goes. So thank you for highlighting that, Alexander.
Yeah, it was incredibly difficult for me to find it and wrap my head around it. But you know, from here, if you know Rails, then like this opens up the floodgates to like, oh, this is a view and it's getting served up by a controller somewhere. And I won't delve into that because
I feel like you might have just kind of hit on question number two, which was tips that you can share that you wish you knew when you were first familiarizing yourself with the code base. So as you're going through this walkthrough, any of those other items would be good to highlight because I think that's definitely a good one.
Yeah, this is probably the most important one. And I was like, wait, how does this get connected? Where's this data coming from? And like, there's the magic behind it. What other tips and tricks? If I go here, something that I really like is, so we have a lot of common components that we use throughout the app, you know, just like loading icons or buttons, you know, that's something that like you should create once and then you're done. And a lot of it comes from GitLab UI. If you have not checked out, there's a public link to get what is available in GitLab UI here at our, basically this is our storybook. We use Storybook to sort of house all these components and show them off. And so if you're ever like, oh, this issue wants me to create a button, and like you can of course pattern match for the rest of the application, but in here, if you go to our storybook, look, and I'll add this to some of our documentations for people starting here. But like you get to view the button, you get to see what inputs it takes, its configurations, and you can see how that affects. You can play around and see how it affects it. So, oh, here's the success button if it's a primary, but here's a secondary one and tertiary. And you get to see, you know, what a link will look like, what a dashed link. Oh, I've never used that one. That looks fun.
Can you add a link to this when you're done to the issue? I think this is a great resource to share.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. So this is another thing that I wish I would have known right off the bat, instead of having to pattern match through the application for like, oh, apparently GL button is what we use. Like, it was great to be able to come here and actually see and mess around with the components in a sandbox. And there is another link that is similar, but for CSS. I just thought of it, so I don't have it pulled up right away. Is it design system? pajamas. No. Okay, I'll add another link. There is another a link that I use to look at CSS. Our design team has done a great job for putting all the CSS for the entire application in one place. Is it this one? No. I should just give up on this. I'll find it later. But anyways, they have all the colors and the reasoning behind that listed out in a very beautiful and intuitive way. And I will add that link as well, because it's something I use when I'm like, oh, what color should this be? And then I can go there and immediately see like, oh, it's actually gray, 50. Oh, which brings me another point. Another thing we have in GitLab UI is we have our utility classes. If you've contributed to GitLab, you know that we shy away from creating specific classes that has just a bunch of CSS in it, and we opt into using utility classes so that it's really intuitive what styling is applied. So like flex fill, or I know that this header has a display flex and its items are aligned center, and it's easy to look at that here. And these classes are easily visible from this endpoint, which basically outputs the utilities SCSS file from GitLab UI. And I can just scroll through here. And a lot of times I do, oh, I mentioned gray. I'm like, oh, I want a gray color. And then I'll find it. I'm like, no, these are background gray. But then I'm like, maybe font color. Color? No, it'd be just color. Yeah, and you can global search here and find the styles you want. Okay, cool.
Awesome. I'm learning so much, Alexander.
I feel like that. Oh,
quick question for you before you move on. Do you use the GraphQL Explorer very much? And would you be comfortable sharing that at all?
Yeah, that's a really great point. Thank you for bringing that up. I definitely do use GraphQL a lot. When I'm testing out my GraphQL queries, you can see I have some saved here on the left-hand side. It's so essential, and I love looking through a schema. A lot of times these tickets, the issues get broken up in such a way where it's like, oh, the backend added a GraphQL query, and it is my job to implement it and have it display data in the front end. And then I'm like, oh, I wonder what they did. And I'll go in here and I'll type vulnerabilities, and I'll scroll through here. Query.vulnerabilities gets the vulnerabilities for an entire instance. Project.vulnerabilities gets the vulnerabilities for just a project, and then group vulnerabilities gets the vulnerabilities just for a group. So I'll look into query, and you can see it takes a bunch of, or what it can take, and it should take, it takes an array of project IDs. So this is if you've looked at the Instance Security Center, you know that you can add and remove projects as you're interested. And that basically updates the IDs that get sent back here for vulnerabilities. But anyways, it's good to like dig in here and see what accepted values are, see what types they are. What is that? Oh, learn about things you didn't even know existed. So I use this a lot. So thank you for bringing that up, Lindsay.
Yeah, and another question, when you're troubleshooting in the browser, and this isn't specific to GraphQL, I think this might be more of a view question. Can you show some of the handy browser tools that you use the most when you're troubleshooting? Maybe, I know that this doesn't work in production, right? We don't have everything turned on to allow you to troubleshoot all of the view code in production, but at least your local and non-prod you can.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mentioning earlier that it's fine to have problems with your GDK. My GDK is currently down, and I tried to get it working for this session, but could not. I have to do a little bit more digging. I'm probably gonna surf the Slack channel. Hopefully someone's had this problem already, and I can just copy what they did. So I was not able to get my...
Great reminder that everybody encounters this, and it's just part of the keeping your environment healthy.
Yes, yeah. So again, do not worry if you spend some time struggling with your GDK. One, I'm sorry. but two, it happens to all of us. I know that you're just trying to contribute, and we really appreciate it. And it really stinks when you just get caught up with environment issues, but it happens to everyone, unfortunately. So I have staging up right now, and that means we do not, that means that like the Vue dev tools are not accessible right now. We turn that off in our Webpack config, but if this was local, I would be able to go to this page, come into my developer tools, and there would be a little Vue tab. I highly recommend browser extension. I highly recommend you download. I'd be able to click on it. I'd be able to look at all the Vue applications that are running, which is more than one. But then also expand that, look at the components that I was showing previously, and they would highlight them on the page. And we could see the data, the props passed in, all that great stuff. If you don't have the Vue browser extension, I can't recommend it enough. But one thing with a larger application that I always have to struggle with is, say I'm trying to make a change. Say like you're new to this page, you don't know where these components are. Like, Justin asked this question for a reason. It's because GitLab is massive, and like, how are you supposed to remember which directories all this stuff is in? And like, this is not a non-trivial path. It's all very difficult. So what I do when I first started is I inspected an element, and I would come in here and I'd look, and I'm highlighting a bunch of stuff, and I would look for very specific wording. So like vulnerabilities count list as a class, very specific, very easy to global search. So I would come into here and I would just search for it, vulnerability count list. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so it gives me a few options. And from here, well, this is the only one that actually has count list. Is it count list layout? No, it's count list. So this is it. This is the repo that's or the file that is showing that count list, and this gives me a great start into figuring out, like, orienting myself in the repo. Other things I do, if I'm CSS styling, I do that inline first, so maybe 5, 6, and I do it that way. And then I get the right utility classes, and then I copy them over into my component. Any other debugging? If GraphQL is acting, if I'm trying to debug a GraphQL thing, I also have the GraphQL browser extension. Let's, that should be working. Hold on 1 second. That one's not needed. Oh wait, where would that come from? Oh, right, I have this. Luckily, from when I last left and before I updated my GEK, I had this tab open, which I was debugging something with, and it hasn't refreshed but my GEK is definitely not working right now. And so this is what I was talking about with the Vue browser extension. You get all the components, you get the data, you get what's computed. You can see there's 3 Vue apps on this page currently. Where are these other ones? Never mind, I won't fall into that trap. Anyways, GraphQL. So if I come back to here, if I make sure this is the right one and I refresh the page, I will look in this GraphQL browser extension, or I'll look in the network tab and just search for GraphQL. And we can see what GraphQL retrieved from the back end. 0000402. Okay, so great. So this vulnerability severities count matches this. We're not like modifying, and under the hood we have GraphQL batching requests, and so there's like 5 requests for this page, but GraphQL has batched them all into a single one to be more performant. Oh wow, there actually is 5. That was a lucky guess. Lindsay, do you have any questions about this workflow?
No, I'm going to watch this video several times because I think that you just shared a lot of really helpful information at a fairly fast pace, but that's okay because it's on video, and that's where videos are helpful because you can pause and rewind. A lot of good troubleshooting and debugging tips, code insight, how to find the code you're looking to change, which I think is a challenge in any new project you start working in. So I don't have any more questions. I think that's fantastic. And let's just make sure. I think you have actually hit most of the questions that we had listed here. So if there's any other tips that you can share, I think you've been very thorough.
Great, I'm glad. Other tips? No, I can't think of anything at this time.
Sam, do you have any questions? Is there anything that, as someone who's the content is new to you, that you know, that you want to ask at all since you're here with us?
I know you mentioned keeping GDK up can be a little bit challenging. Do you have any tips on how to do that, or how to, you know, any gotchas or pitfalls to avoid in either setting it up or keeping it running? Perhaps fine print in the instructions, but, you know, I know when I follow instructions, I sometimes miss steps if they're not like bolded or jumping out to me. You know, are there any things that are, you know, kind of critical as part of that?
Yeah, that is a great question. And unfortunately, it's not straightforward. There's no silver bullet to like always have your GDK in perfect health, or to fix it as I have shown here. Like, I am using staging because I was working on it for a half hour before this meeting, and I was like, man, dang it, I'm not gonna be able to show my local environment. But what I would say is, you know, GDK update, GDK reconfigure, GDK start. Those are sort of my go-to.
I'm just sharing a random document because it's I take Alexander's troubleshooting for the GDK very seriously. And here are my notes directly from troubleshooting sessions that I've had with Alexander, which we can add somewhere if that's helpful. But, you know, it's really just that, you know, start with a GDK update. If that doesn't work, do your GDK reconfigure. There's a few steps that you need to follow if you do that. I throw GDK doctors around like crazy. I don't actually know what it does.
Yeah, that's great. You should be throwing GDK doctors around. They do nothing but tell you if something's wrong.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of times, if something is wrong, and GDK doctor may not catch it, it's not perfect, and so sometimes you're like, well, it's not working, but GDK doctor says there's something wrong, and I know that's just not true. So take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, always remember to start your Docker machine up. That's
an embarrassing one when you ask for help and you realize that's what your misstep was.
And let me tell you, their hours have been lost to me being like, why isn't this working? I've restarted my computer, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh yeah, I need to start a Docker machine. It was, I know when I first started here, I basically never turned it off. And then the first time I restarted my computer, I completely forgot, and it was terrible. Yeah. Update and configure are good. And I think one thing that's important is like, you cannot just blindly run GDK update or GDK configure. You should be looking at the latest output from it. So for example, actually, let me share my screen again.
That's why I troubleshoot your GDK problems, Alexander.
I ran GDK update and it gave me this error. And like, this is, I'm going off completely this. I ran GDK doctor. There were some issues with that. But actually reading what the error was is useful. And I know that sounds sort of straightforward, but I know I am so used to just like running scripts, and like, it takes a little bit. So you like run this and you go away and you look at an issue or something, you come back and like, oh, is that working? And sometimes it is, sometimes it is not. So any other pro tips? No, don't be afraid to ask someone for help. It's way better if you've spent a little bit of time on it to just throw something in Slack channels like, hey, is anyone else getting this?
And usually if you just search for your error, especially in the GDK channel, someone else within the last couple of weeks has experienced that, and you can follow the conversation and instructions that person went through. And for me, let's say 7 times out of 10, that has helped me resolve my problem. The other
Right.
3 times I reach out and ask the question myself, like Alexander said.
Yeah, I'm always going through the Slack channel, be like, someone's had, like, that's what I'm actually probably gonna do after this meeting, is I'm gonna take that error message, I'm gonna go to the GEK channel, and hopefully someone's like, hey, anyone encounter this? And there's a silver bullet in there for me.
If you want to ask about my workhorse too, that would be good.
I forgot about what your workhorse.
So there's another, there's also the GitLab, GitLab Compose Kit, but I think that's mostly for Linux users, if I understand correctly. But I know it's supposed to be more lightweight. So, hi Jen, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
Unfortunately, we're getting close to the end of our discussion, but we have been recording and we will definitely be sharing it. Since we have you here and we are, wrapping up, like I said, what kind of questions did you come with in mind today?
Mostly just looking for good tickets to contribute, just to get started. Because it's sort of challenging to contextualize yourself in a project when you're jumping in.
Can you tell us a little bit? Are you looking for front-end view type issues? Okay, well, great.
Front end, good to get started and sort of orient on the code base.
Cool. So I'm going to do a very quick share of the board that I shared earlier in the call. Sam and Alexander, since we've been through some of this content, you guys are welcome to stay, but if you want to drop, you can. I understand that. And Jen, like I said, I want to make sure that we share with you the rest of the video because Alexander has done an excellent job in this call of doing a walkthrough of some of the code that supports our areas of the product and some troubleshooting steps, some of the tools that he uses. So I think that'll be really valuable for you as well.
Fantastic.
So I am going to, and I'm assuming that you saw the issue that you got the link, so you did. The GitLab issue has a lot of good links to share, but the one I'm going to share right now is in number 3, our issue board.
Mm-hmm.
So this issue board is specific to the Threat Insights group. So we do have, within threat management, which is our larger subdepartment, we have container security, which focuses a lot on like Kubernetes security, like network policies and things like that. And then we have Threat Insights, which is what we're talking about more today. So Threat Insights is about our security dashboards. So just to illustrate, it's so great to be in our product all the time and just be able to show it with one click. So when I mean security dashboards, I'm talking about, this is our group level security dashboard. So it's gonna show the vulnerabilities. Oh, it's slow right now for some reason. It might be my internet. The vulnerabilities for this particular project. Oh, I'm not at the project level, sorry. This is the group level. So for the projects within this GitLab.org group, as well as this vulnerability list. So our part of the product is all focused around the security management. Vulnerability management is the area that we maintain. And I apologize, I don't know why everything's so slow all of a sudden. And so this, we've got 3 different versions of this dashboard: a group level, an instance level, and a project level. So you can see kind of different levels of granularity. If it's just one project you're looking for, a group of projects, or your whole GitLab instance, and then all of the details for each of these vulnerabilities. Another place that you can see this information, which is going to be a little hard because I don't have a tab open with an example, is if you submit an MR and you're running security scans in your CI/CD pipeline, we show security results at the MR view as well. So that's just to give you a little bit of high level of these are the parts of the application that our team owns. And that's what's represented here on this board. So to your point before about it's sort of hard to find the best first issues to pick up, we have a label that GitLab adds to try and help you identify those issues, which is this good for new contributors. So the link that I provided in the issue is all of the Threat Insights issues that we've deemed good for new contributors. And I think we could be adding more of these labels. The engineering managers typically add them as issues are created. You can see right now we have a bunch of front-end issues, but not quite as many back-end issues. So what you're seeing here is our product workflow. If I expand all of these, you can see our product workflow works from left to right. All of these anything that doesn't have a product workflow will end up in this ambiguous open column. But our UX designers will start with the process of design. They will work with our customer base and user testing to validate their solution. And then they work with the engineering team. You can see there's definitions over them to break down this work. And then we as a team start to refine it. So I really think that the best place to look would be this ready for development column. But if you do see items under refinement that you think are interesting, I would encourage you to put a comment in it and ask the engineer who is refining it, you know, is this ready to go? I think I can totally do this. So these are really the two big columns. Since you said you were looking mostly at front end type work, we do have a front end and a back end label that helps you filter it down a little bit more. So just adding that front end label will give you even more refined list. And you can see now in the ready for development, you know, we've got a number of issues here that are around a GraphQL migration of this page right here. So this page is currently using a REST endpoint, and we have, our backend team has already built out the GraphQL mutations or queries. So we just want to update that page to use them. And we have a number of issues here, I think 5 or so, that are targeted at that GraphQL migration. And then we also have what we call follow-ups. So a lot of times when an engineer is merging changes and the reviewer or the maintainer has some feedback that's not pressing for that particular feature release, we'll create a follow-up issue. And that's what you see in these bottom 2 issues. These are follow-ups from previous conversations that came out of MR discussions from engineers on the team. So those are not fun, those are good for early community contributors because there's a lot of context there. You know, it'll take you to the actual code that you want to change. It's not a feature enhancement, so it's not like there's a product manager or a product you know, UX person that's waiting for it. So does that help at all?
It does. Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Yeah. I don't want to repeat too much for the video. And so, like I said, I want to encourage you to take a look at it. We do have, and which is linked to here, we're building out a snippet to try to help put together some answers to a lot of these questions that contributors have asked. So we're constantly adding to this. So as you have new questions, I encourage you to either add them to the issue that we were looking at, the one for this office hours, or I think you'd have access also to add a comment to this snippet that's linked to directly. Hopefully your question might be answered here. We've got some regularly asked questions as well as some troubleshooting tips here. But like I said, I think that it really could use some additional information as we have new community contributors and we capture the types of questions that come up.
Fantastic. Well, I'll keep them in mind and add anything that I run into.
And I don't know, have you contributed at all to GitLab before?
I haven't, no.
Okay.
So yeah.
I encourage you to join the Gitters channel. We have a Slack channel just for community contributors where you can ask any questions. You know, there's going to be a lot of other community contributors there that can help share their experiences with you. We've got a lot of GitLab employees there ready to answer your questions. I also linked to a blog on here that I think would be really helpful for anyone who's just getting started at contributing to GitLab. It was written by one of the engineers here on the team, and I think it does a fantastic job of just walking you through some of the setup, you know, what I was just talking about around finding an issue, how you know, work your changes through the pipeline, all the way through testing.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm so excited that this resource is available. This is awesome.
Well, we're really glad you joined us. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll look forward to watching the rest of the video and also looking forward to getting my hands dirty.
Cool. Can't wait to hear more from you, Jen. Alexander here on the call is one of the front-end engineers on the threat management team who helps out so much with our community contributors. So, you know, hopefully you'll get a chance to work with him.
Cool.
If you're
awesome.
lucky.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you, Alexander, for all of your helpful walkthrough, and all of the information you've shared today. I will take this recording and I will post it both to this issue, to the Gitters channel, to our community office. I think we have a YouTube channel for these videos too. So we'll share it as widely as we can.
Great. Well,
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, friends.